Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston University's Genealogy Programs webinar. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. My name is Sarah, and I will be moderating today's session with our host and program director, Melindy Lutz-Byrne. We will be conducting a live Q&A session at the end of our presentation. Please use the questions box in your attendee control panel to submit all questions throughout the duration of the webinar or during the Q&A session. We will try to address as many questions as time permits. And here's an overview of the topics we will cover during today's presentation, including the two courses offered at BU, which is Genealogical Principles and the Genealogical Research Certificate Program, the curriculum covered in each course, course logistics, and how to register. I would now like to introduce Melindy Lutz-Byrne, the Genealogy Program Director, author, editor, cultural anthropologist and archivist, and fellow and former president of the American Society of Genealogists. Melindy specializes in forensic genealogy and has served as lead instructor for 10 years, helping to design and staff the program. Melindy is an accomplished lecturer and speaker and brings an engaging lesson to her students. Melindy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's my pleasure to address everybody about the genealogy programs here at BU. Next slide, please. I'm celebrating 10 years as program director, and we've seen many changes. And today we're going to be talking about our new Genealogical Principles course and the newly revised Certificate in Genealogical Research. Next slide. So Genealogical Principles is our entry-level course. It provides hands-on practice in a series of essential skills for the beginning genealogist and someone with a moderate amount of experience, but perhaps not a lot of success so far. Our course is 7 weeks in duration, and it covers some topics that are in really high demand. Next slide, please. Principles begins with foundations, some very basic things having to do with the tools that we use. We discuss the genealogical proof standard. We do some work in looking for particular records and then doing deep dives into those records. Some of the topics include immigration, and we do look at photo identification briefly in genealogical principles. Next slide. We do some focus on genealogical writing. Writing the narrative is one of the most difficult things for students in our certificate program, so we'd like to address how this is done well in principles so that people take it with them to further work. We do look at probate records. We do a lot about structure of the narrative, and there's a lot of focus on writing the conclusion, which may be part of a proof statement or a proof argument. Next slide. There is some practice, and we show you a number of good ways to report and to organize the research that you do. We talk about research reports, we talk about the importance of timelines, and we go through a number of pay databases that we supply access to during the course. Next slide. A real plus in genealogical principles that we had not offered before is a module on genetic genealogy. It will be an introductory level look and primarily address what the major testing companies do and what tests you would use to try to find what kind of answers. Um, we also address the ethics of doing genetic genealogy because, quite honestly, the results people find are not always what they expect. And it can be a tremendously life changing thing to find out that you're not who you thought you were, or somebody else is not who you thought he or she was. So we take a lot of time to talk about that and to prepare people for the results they may find. We talk about mitochondrial and Y-DNA, but not the deeper dive into autosomal DNA that is fueling a lot of interest in genealogy these days. That's saved because it's a much more complex topic for the next course, the research certificate program. Next slide, please. We have 3 essential books for the principles course. Kimberly Powell's The Everything Guide to Online Genealogy, the Board for Certification's Genealogy Standards, which it's a skinny little book and it sounds daunting, but there are 82 standards and they make a lot of sense if you follow them and understand why they're there. You've got quite a leg up on how you do your research. And the last book is Bettinger and Wayne's Genetic Genealogy in Practice. This is a terrific introduction to the topic if you have no background to begin with. And not only are there quizzes in the class, but also in the back of the book, there are questions and the answers to those questions. So it's a regular workbook and very valuable. Next slide, please. So this is to introduce the Genealogical Research Certificate Program. It's taught by nationally recognized experts. It's based on the Genealogical Proof Standard, and it mimics the 7 requirements that the Board for Certification of Genealogists puts forth in the portfolio testing system that gets you certified as a genealogist. There are 4 graded modules that are presented over 15 weeks. You see the names of them 1, 2, 3, 4 below. These are timed. They run for a certain number of weeks each. For instance, genealogical methods is 5 weeks, and you must complete assignments within that. You may think of an online course as very free form, and it does tend to be asynchronous as far as when you post a question, it can be later that you get an answer. It's not a direct conversation, but in so much as you do the work, uh, check in daily, and are um, working through the things that are assigned for that week in that unit, you can keep up and progress and be graded accordingly. Next slide. The certificate program has a prerequisite, and that is some exposure, some research at a certain level to genealogical publications. You should have attended conferences or lectures, and you should have done some research on your own before tackling this. People in research occupations have been very successful students in this course in the past. Probably the most attended has been from librarians, um, teachers. We've had, from the very first, we've had medical professionals. In fact, our very first class, we had a organ donor tracer from Harvard Medical School. Uh, We do see a number of anthropologists, some archivists, some authors who are looking to supplement the way they uh, do their research for everything from novels to biographies. We've had lawyers and biologists and people who are doing professional investigation. All these skills are addressed and amplified through our courseware. Next slide. So we recommend that you be reasonably computer literate. You will need to be able to open and close a Word document and to attach it. There's an orientation that you'll take prior to starting the class, which will introduce you to the system that Boston University uses. You'll need high speed internet access because occasionally you'll have live classroom interactions. You'll be hearing someone speak live, and those will be recorded and available to retrieve just as this webinar is being recorded, and you'll be able to retrieve later. You should have good written English skills. We've had people from 16 different countries who have other languages as their first language who've done quite well, but you do need to be able to follow directions, sometimes quite literally. And so English skills in writing are very helpful. It'll make your assignments go faster. Some experience with records, as I mentioned, and some with reading genealogical journals. There are 5 or 6 that are available online and or through memberships. And later on, we'll be talking about memberships in certain organizations getting you abatements on the tuition. So we'll talk about that then. You should have done some investigation, and you should also be familiar with databases like Ancestry.com or FamilySearch.org or Heritage Quest. These are uh, bread and butter databases that you will use extensively in the course, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to already have some expertise with them when you start. Next slide. So the first module is 5 weeks, and it addresses how to analyze and make the steps clear to solve a complex problem. It focuses on critical thinking skills. It outlines a research cycle, and it will start with some Y-DNA and mitochondrial DNA and how it's used for ancestry in the umbilical or mother's line or Y or father's line. Next slide. The second module, evidence evaluation and documentation, is 4 weeks. And this is where you learn the qualities of evidence, how to evaluate evidence, how to cite the evidence that you use in a way that allows others to find that evidence, and also for you to fully evaluate the evidence itself. The citation is the key to you understanding where this came from, what the origin was, who the informant was, and where you could find it later. There will also be logical methods of solution, including my favorite, which is syllogistic logic, that are covered in this. Next slide, please. Module 3 is forensic genealogy. It's also 4 weeks. And I'm the lead instructor with my co-lead, Jennifer Zink. We cover everything from ethics to the very complex autosomal DNA tracing that has been much in the news lately, uh, particularly after the Golden State Killer was identified, a suspect was identified through that particular method. We talk about tracing people um, in public records, so private lives in public records, and the ethics of doing this is a central part of the module. And the photo identification is quite a lot of fun. I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. Next slide. Uh, just wanted to give you a taste of what the autosomal DNA unit in this forensic module is like. And after you've taken it, if you don't already understand what you're looking at in this slide, you will when we're done. Next slide. The final module is genealogy as a profession, and here we explore all sorts of business opportunities, uh, how to prepare reports for different audiences, uh, some of the ethics and uh, skills that need to be in place for you to do a competent job as a genealogist. Our faculty in that program have all been practicing genealogists for many years and have a lot of insight and ideas for individuals as you finish the certificate program. We have 4 books that are required reading during the certificate program, and they're pictured here. Uh, 2 you've already seen in the principles course, and the editions are Professional Genealogy, the new edition that came out today. Uh, there'll be considerable reading in those chapters, and this is a must-have book for practicing professionals. And also Mastering Genealogical Documentation by Dr. Jones. Uh, that will be used heavily in Module 2. Next slide. So we have a number of our graduates who have gone on to full-time genealogical research, and here are interviews from 2 of them. Mary Tedesco may be familiar to you from the PBS TV series Genealogy Roadshow. She was one of our early graduates about 2011, I think, and you can take the time to read her interview. When we're finished, this will be available for you to review in a recorded form. Next slide, please. Here we have Michael McClellan. He's also been a professional genealogist for many years, and after graduating from the BU program, it really turbocharged his business, and he has some good things to say about it as well. Next slide. And this is the picture that I was going to tell you a little bit about to introduce you to the photo identification work that we do in the forensic module. Um, the 5-step procedure that we do to identify people in a picture like this starts as long as you have at least 3 people in the picture and you know where the picture was taken. So I tell you now that at the end of the course, you are able to name all these people, but the only thing I knew when I picked up this picture to identify it, and you will know when you pick it up to identify it, is that it was taken in Lawrence, Massachusetts. So if you think it's impossible, you're not alone, but you'll be pleasantly surprised. Next slide, please. This is our current faculty. Julie Machuca and Connie Lenzen and Allison Ryle teach the principles class, and Angela McGee, Jennifer Zink, and I, Allison and Julie, teach the certificate course. Next slide. And I think this is where I hand off to our enrollment advisor, Carrie Scott.
Thank you so much, Melindy. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to tell you a little bit about the courses so that you're familiar with the logistics. These are, since you just saw the instructors, these are instructor-led courses. One of the most important things I think all students should know is the courses both are asynchronous. So there is no set time of day or day of week that we require students to log in to complete their work. However, there will be weekly assignments, meaning reading assignments, writing assignments, and so on, that you do want to meet your weekly deadlines. As Melindy mentioned earlier, there will be some optional live webinars as part of the course. If you are able to attend them, fantastic. That's what we would love to have you. However, if your schedule does not allow you to, do not fret. We will record them and then embed them into your course so that you will have access to them at a later point in time. The genealogy principles course, the approximate time commitment for you to be successful in the course is approximately 7 to 10 hours per week. And with the certificate program, the advanced course, it is about 14 to 20 hours per week. If you do have any questions when you're in the course, you are able to communicate with the faculty via a message board. So you would send them a message and they would respond back. As far as internet browsers go, Firefox and Google Chrome are recommended. And the platform that BU uses to host the course is called Blackboard. Some of you who may have taken other online courses with other schools, this might be familiar with you as it is a popular platform. Next slide, please. Okay, our next session, let me start out by saying this. We offer the genealogy programs 3 times a year, every January, every May, and every September. The next coming session will be our January session. It starts on January 22nd, and the enrollment deadline is December 21st. So enrollment is currently open, and you have between now and the 21st to enroll. The tuition for the principles course is $995, and the tuition for the certificate course is $2,695. This information is on our website, which is listed below at genealogyonline.bu.edu. So if you do go to explore the website after the webinar, you can click on enrollment and you will see the dates in both courses and the tuition. Next slide, please. We do offer members of certain genealogy groups a tuition reduction. So if you are a member of American Ancestors, formerly New England Historical Genealogy Society, if you're a member of APG, the Association of Professional Genealogists, NGS, which is National Genealogical Society, and last but not least, SCGS, which is the Southern California Genealogical Society. There would be a 10% discount off of either the principles course, off of the $995 tuition, or the certificate course off of the $26.95 tuition. we make these discounts readily available to students online. So if you are considering the January session, you will see various discount codes for these groups right within your shopping cart. So you would simply take the code, enter it, click apply, and you will see the tuition reduction automatically. Next slide, please. And I know we're about to enter the question and answer session of the webinar. However, if you do have additional questions, maybe ones that are specific to you, please feel free. We do have enrollment advisors that are available to answer questions, whether it's today or tomorrow or next week. Please feel free. You can email us, which is bostonuniversity@mindmax.net. You can call us at the 617-502-8822, or you can visit our website. When you visit our website, we try to always have the most up-to-date information about the courses available to you, as well as there is an option to live chat with an enrollment advisor. And next slide, please. Okay, Sarah, I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Carrie and Melindy, for the valuable information about our genealogy programs. At this time, we will begin the questions and answers session. And as a reminder, please use the questions box on the right-hand side of your screen to ask your questions. We already have a few questions that have come in throughout the webinar, so we'll dive right in here. All right, starting with, so Melindy, this one I'll pass to you first, please. This person is asking what the ramp-up period might be like to become a professional genealogist and the potential for making income.
Thank you, Sarah. And that's a great question. This has been changing very rapidly in the last couple of years. So more and more students are coming to this genealogy program, particularly with an eye to making an income. And it had earlier been that people were looking for self-employment opportunities, and it's still a very strong place for you to enter that kind of self-employed, self-advertising, self-marketing, self-selecting of clients kind of market. But now even more opportunities are available, especially in subfields. So if you are interested in lineage societies, there are a whole series of organizations that it is required that you provide standards level proof that you are a lineal descendant, and a lot of people need help with that. So there are a good number of people like that. There are also legacy scholarships at a number of the Ivy League colleges, and I know of graduates who are working to demonstrate that someone's teenager is a descendant of a certain person who left scholarship money for descendants, and that's actually quite a well-paid position. Uh, there are people who go into forensic genealogy of different kinds. The ones who do probate air tracing work have traditionally been the most highly paid of all. Um, think about cases like Prince's estate, where he was intestate, and a large number of people came forward claiming. Genealogists are working that. Genealogists worked the Howard Hughes estates and the many claims against that, just to name a few famous ones. There are a number of companies, several of them are in Salt Lake City, including one owned now by Ancestry that used to be pro genealogists, that hires our graduates straight out of the program. Just the other day, we had someone be hired that was a specialist in Tidewater, Virginia. They look for people who can work from a different location than Salt Lake, or who are physically in Salt Lake and who can come in to the Family History Library and do research, or to their offices there in Salt Lake to do research. These positions pay anywhere from 40,000 to 80,000, and in my experience, people who've got a number of years in and are in some of these clearly defined spaces can make a six-figure income. Not everybody does that. A lot of people put out a shingle and will wait for people to come to them. That's based on where you are and what your specialty is, will indicate how many customers you might have a market with. And one of the real advantages to this program and graduating, if you pass each of the modules and receive the certificate, you are invited by the alumni group, which is now over 4,000 people. Probably only about 900 of them are active on this list serve that you'll be invited to. And they will advertise jobs they have, such as, I need a solution in records that are going to be in Southern Florida. I'm paying X amount of money, that sort of thing. You can also turn to those alums and ask questions. I have a client who has a special need in Bulgaria, and we have a student who lives, a graduate who lives in Bulgaria, and she does all the work for Bulgaria for our BU alums. So it's a very cordial, convivial, positive group helping each other. And I post jobs like the one I mentioned with the Ancestry Company regularly, and people have nabbed some good ones.
Great. Thank you so much, Melindy. And Carrie, I will pass the second question to you, please. Does the cost of tuition include the books? And can you explain that, please?
Thank you, Sarah. That is a great question. So the tuition cost does not include the cost of the books. The students are responsible for purchasing the books on their own. As far as the books go, the principal's course has 3 books. Approximate cost for all 3 books would be about $100. The certificate course, there are 4 books, and the approximate cost of all 4 books is $200. Some students already own a couple of these, so you might only need to buy 1 or 2. The students who are going from principals to certificate, 2 of them are the same book to help you with costs. So I would suggest to go to any reputable bookstore. That could be from Barnes & Noble to Amazon to a genealogical website. Any reputable bookstore would have the books available to you.
Thank you, Carrie. And Melindy, Carrie had mentioned the tuition discount for folks who are in those genealogical societies, but do you recommend for someone to join one of these as a beginner other than for the tuition discount?
Wonderful question, Sarah. Yes, because most of these societies have excellent publications, the advantage goes well beyond the tuition abatement. The journals, especially at the NEHGS and the NGS, are examples of how people have solved questions. The NGS Quarterly, of which I am a co-editor, it's a teaching journal. So the problems that are discussed are presented in the way in which they were solved. And so you will see used in both the courses some actual articles from that publication and others that take you step by step through a solution. And that's very good if you can draw the learning points from it and apply it to the problems you try to solve.
Wonderful, thank you. And can you also describe the average class size for our programs?
Uh, Recently, we have been seeing about 150 students registered in each of the classes each semester. In the certificate program, those students are broken up into groups, and the groups are usually between 25 and 35 classmates, and each group is assigned a facilitator to assist the overall instructor.
Thank you, Melindy. And Carrie, can you please describe our payment plan options and how folks can make payments in installments?
Absolutely. So I'm going to start out with the principles course. The principles course is the shorter in length course, 7 weeks. The tuition for that course is $995. For students who are looking for the January session, if you enroll during the month of October, there would be a 3-month payment plan where we would take your tuition and simply divide by 3, and that will be your monthly payment. The payments would be made via any major credit card. You could enroll with the payment plan directly on the website, or you can enroll with us over the phone, whatever you're more comfortable with. The 3-month payment plan goes away at the end of the month, and in November, it becomes a 2-month payment plan, and in December, it becomes a payment in full. Regardless of which month you enroll in, the tuition is the same. The difference is the number of months we divide out your payment plan by. Now, the payment plan that I just described for principals, it is the same for certificate. The only difference is going to be the tuition. So we would take the $26.95 tuition for anyone who enrolls in October who chooses a payment plan, and we could divide by 3 for a 3-month payment plan over October, November, December. For students who enroll in November, it's a 2-month payment plan, and then for students who enroll in December, it is a payment in full. For anyone who is interested in a longer payment plan, I would encourage you to give us a call, and you would not be enrolling in the January session. You would be enrolling in the May 2019 session, and we would be able to have a longer payment plan for you.
Thank you, Carrie. And Melindy, for a question for you, would students be able to pass the professional certification after taking the certificate program? Or do you suggest that students have practical experience before taking these exams?
The certification portfolio is how the Board for Certification judges whether someone is going to receive their CG or not. So you must be able to bring a independently worked set of 3 problems that meet certain parameters to the portfolio in order to submit and be considered. So what the certificate program does is expose you to all the skill sets that would be needed in most circumstances to meet or exceed the expectations of the board for certification. So by using the Genealogy Standards book, following the genealogical proof standard, and having experience in records that's independent from the courses, so that you can write up these completely independent proofs and 3-generation treatments with successive proof arguments. You do need to have practical experience on top of the skill set to achieve that experience. And so while you do have the skills when you graduate, you do need to practice and do things independently. You're not allowed to have um, group interaction or direct advice about what you write for your portfolio. So you can't take uh, parts of the BU course, for instance, and uh, having had feedback from your instructors, then use it again for the portfolio. I think that pretty much covers the question.
That does. Thank you. And Melindy, is it possible to do lessons ahead of time or afterwards if some folks may be unable to at the time?
If you aren't able to meet the deadlines under certain circumstances, uh, like having an ADA exception, Americans with Disabilities Act, um, it's very difficult for the staff to grade such things. Um, and we understand that things happen. If you cannot meet the deadlines, there are opportunities to withdraw from the class and resume at another time. We've had people who've had deaths in the family, or just terrible things happen, and they could not keep up with the class. And so those potential delays. But in the normal course of the class, if you're going to be late, you're marked late and it loses points. And if it's after the module closes, it may not be graded at all because the staff is only retained for the period that they are um, actually teaching. And when the module closes, they go home basically. So um, it's important to stay up with the class. It's important to check in daily. It's important to participate in discussions or at least observe them. And it's as interactive as you want it to be, but the timing is very important for all the reasons I just described.
Thank you, Melindy. That's great. And can you also please give an overview of the tools that professionals might use, such as software or archives, and how much these might cost?
Well, um, every practice is different, and you would probably want to have all the basic genealogical databases at hand. Um, so I could tell you some of the databases. The programs that you use to manipulate your information are highly personal. I don't directly recommend anything. Being old school myself, I use Excel and I use Word and I use uh, GEDmatch and the CSV files, the raw data for the genetic genealogy. But uh, there is opportunity to discuss with classmates during the course both of the courses, what they like to use, and I think you'd be surprised at the variety. So many of them that were very useful in the past have evolved or disappeared. The Master Genealogist was a favorite of mine years ago, and it's completely gone. Some of the simpler, easy ones like PAF, completely gone. But databases that you should have access to include all of the major newspaper databases. That would be Genealogy Bank, newspaperarchives.com, newspapers.com, and then there are free ones like the Hathi Trust. FamilySearch.org is a very important website with many different kinds of offerings. Um, our graduates regularly use their wikis, which are written by experts about places, record classes, all the things that we don't really teach directly, but teach you to find. Uh, we're more methodology and technique. And I guess if you are plugged into any of the online versions of some of the conferences that have been held in the last 2 years or so, you can find recommendations there for other uh, software.
Thank you, Melindy. And you mentioned students being able to talk with other students. Is there any assignments that require students to collaborate with others in group sessions?
There are no required group sessions. What happens, I can speak to the forensic module in the certificate course directly. Uh, for instance, the picture I showed of the 11 people has, it is given in an introductory manner. I step you through the 5 steps you use to solve it. And then there's a discussion area where people can discuss the questions in an assessment. So you're asked things about the empty wicker bench that's there in the picture. And so your classmates will say, well, the empty wicker chair dates from XYZ years because there's a catalog online for wicker furniture that was made in northern Massachusetts in such and such a year, and so people will do research. They'll write what they found, and you can either be a lurker and watch as other people discuss it, or you can participate actively and put in your thoughts about what that wicker chair means and why it's empty. And all points of the exercise can be discussed in an assessment. In the assignments, you do your own work privately, and it's not a team experience, but you do have a team experience with the problem type where you can see how it's done so that when you're on your own, you're not completely at sea about what your next step should be.
Great, thank you. And another question comes in asking if it's recommended that folks take the principles course before engaging in the certificate course. And I'm sure that's based on skill level, but can you speak just a little bit to that, please?
That's a big question for a lot of people. Some people say, I've been a researcher for 20 years and I've done all the vital records and I've done all this and all that, and yet they're still not successful. And so it's not just a measure of time, it's a measure of facility. If you're very good at researching in a way that you have reached without formal education, then you may well be ready for uh, the certificate program. If, however, you're not familiar with uh, genetic genealogy at all, and a lot of people aren't, it's not a big problem, or you've never written up a genealogical answer to a question, maybe you've never posed a formal question, uh, but you just go in and look for stuff and collect it and then sort it later. Uh, these are habits that principals would help you break or introduce you in a um, measured way to genetic genealogy and things that may be very new to you. So the place to come face to face with standards, if those are new to you, or genetic genealogy, would not be the certificate program, because this is like off the deep end of the pool from day one. You need to be up to speed. If you have a question about whether you are ready or not, then look carefully at what's in the principles course and consider whether a review even of that material would be good for you. Uh, you don't want to start the certificate course and discover that you really should have prepared more.
Thank you, Melindy. And another question comes in. Do you learn to do research in other countries other than just American genealogy research? And can you speak just a little bit to that, please?
Because almost all of our students have been English language speakers first, most of our examples are Canadian or American or British, but increasingly our caseload for students, particularly in the certificate program, is European and to some extent uh, Asian. So we have a lot of uh, European countries. Um, some of our faculty are experts in Russian or Spanish or uh, French or German records, and some of the courseware does go around immigration to the US, where the passenger lists were written at the point of embarking, not where they land. So you experience the handwriting from a European author. You see a number of um, Jewish or Orthodox or Roman Catholic records that may be in Latin and other languages. So it's not exclusively American, but uh, it's not so foreign that someone who only spoke English or read English would have difficulty.
Thank you, Melindy. And I think this is a topic we've sort of touched upon throughout the duration of this webinar, but it's definitely a nice one to address again. Have you seen growth in opportunities for genetic genealogists or in the forensic field?
I think the answer is yes. It's a mixed bag at the moment. There are tremendous numbers of volunteers who have been using uh, genetic genealogy, especially the autosomal DNA, to help families and individuals looking for biological parents or a biological child. And while you can hire someone, you can also turn to volunteer groups who do this. Uh, and if you hire someone, it's rather like hiring a professional investigator, a PI, um, where your information is completely private. So it's difficult to speak directly to just how many of us are doing this professionally because we can't talk about it. So it's an ethical quandary, but I do know quite a number of people who are doing the adoption route. And indeed, it was an adoption or biological parent search that uh, honed the skills of Dr. Barbara Ray Venter, who is the genealogist behind the identification of the Golden State Killer suspect. And we are watching what the FBI will do. They are famous for training the trainers and training their own force from within. So, what they will likely do is something like hire instructors to teach their agents, and then those agents will go on to teach other agents how to do this. So it becomes a skill that will be valued in the FBI, but not necessarily in the long run a position that someone would have. Currently, um, people who do research to find primary next of kin, it's called PNOC, for the identification of remains of American service people who are lost in foreign wars. Uh, that is only done by someone who is board certified or under the direction of someone who's board certified, uh, which is something that quite a number of our graduates have gone on to do. There's a very complicated government bidding system for those cases, but a number of companies like SNA who have won those bids hire genealogists who are not certified yet to do the work, and then it's checked by a certified genealogist. So that opportunity has skyrocketed since the Congress has twice uh, more than doubled the amount of money available to successfully identify proactively people who are related to these missing servicemen so that they can be asked to participate in a DNA database that will, when the remains are recovered, be searched to match names to the remains. Um, this program's been in place for more than 20 years that I know of, and uh, literally dozens of our alums have done that casework. So, forensic, as far as being a consultant to a law enforcement agency, this has been a really tough road to row to hoe. This is mostly because law enforcement has been very slow to accept the accuracy of autosomal DNA compared to CODIS. And that's a whole long discussion in itself. CODIS has been ramped up to 22 markers, but it has a lot to do with the legal restrictions on what Congress and the courts have said is permissible. And it's looking very good for it being permissible, but law enforcement's also notorious for having no money. So most of the cases that you see being um, talked about in the press were done for free. The exception is Parabon, uh, a company that has hired exactly one genetic genealogist to do research for them. And so to say that it's a growing field would be correct, but there may be some stutter steps in there. There are also advisors who do genetic advising for diseases and similar things. And there may be counseling positions for people with uh, psychology backgrounds where genetic genealogy would be a big help in what they say and what they tell people. Uh, we are genealogists. We are not lawyers. We are not medical persons. We're not, but some of our students may be those things. Like many of the jobs that I post in the alum list are for people with an MLS. So if you have a JD and you want to be on a prosecution team or a defense team and you have this genetic genealogy training as well, I think it is a value added thing for your employment in another field.
All right. Thank you very much, Melindy. And at this time, it looks like we're at the close of our webinar session. We've had a lot of great answers, or a lot of great questions come in with great answers, of course. And just as a reminder, I know we have a couple questions about this. We will be sending a recording of this webinar to all of our registrants today. So just keep a lookout in your inbox within the next couple of days to receive this. And I'd like to thank you all again for joining us. We hope the information presented will help guide you in your genealogical journey. And have a pleasant afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.